Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Maker's Bar, where we are trying to create 1 million leaders. My name is Troy Goldenberg. I'll be your host today. I'm here with Shabbos Kestenbaum. Shabbos, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Very much looking forward to it. Just so everyone knows, I came across Shabbos on Twitter originally, but he has been a growing figure in, I'd say, the American Jewish voice and movement since this current war has broken out. And it's been very cool to follow your journey. Do you want to walk us down that journey? You can start from anywhere. You can start from childhood if you'd like. You can start from college, wherever you like.
Okay, wow, you're giving me a lot of freeway here. So I guess I'll start somewhat from the beginning. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I come from a family of six. I'm one of seven, which is not out of the ordinary for an Orthodox community in the slightest. And I was raised as a first-generation American, but also as an observant Jewish person. And I never saw those two as contradictory. On the contrary, they were quite complementary. So values of life and liberty and pursuit of happiness, justice, all of those things have really inculcated my understanding of what it means to live as an American citizen and as an observant spiritual individual. And I've always been fascinated by religion itself. So my whole life, I went to Jewish school. I lived in the old city of Jerusalem for two and a half years, literally living 2 minutes away from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, from the Dome of the Rock, from the Western Wall. And of course, it's all male. Of course, all of my instructors are deeply observant, ultra-Orthodox rabbis. And it dawned on me after my experience in yeshiva at this religious institution in Israel that I wanted to study theology from a purely academic perspective, purely secular. So for the very first time in my life, I was going to learn religion with women, with non-Jews, with people who do not share my experiences, and decided that given that theology is not a very practical pursuit, I would only be able to rationalize or justify it if I did it at an institution that has pretty good name recognition. So applied to Harvard, lo and behold, got in, full scholarship, not bad. And I was really excited not only to learn from other people's culture and backgrounds and belief systems, but to contribute to that conversation. I was the only individual in my program, the Harvard Divinity School, that wears a yarmulke, that eats kosher, keeps the Sabbath, those types of observances. And unfortunately, as I'm sure we'll get to in a moment, it became readily apparent that that conversation that I wanted to be a part of was really not built for people like me, people who have strong connections to the state and the land of Israel, people whose Zionism is a core part of their religious identity, people who believe strongly in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And this is well before October 7th, the Hamas invasion of Israel, but there were all these warning signs. And of course, after October 7th, or really the night of October 7th, to be more specific, those illusions came crumbling down very, very quickly.
So on that note, actually, so kind of go with pre-October 7th and move into October 7th, post-October 7th and everything. I am curious to hear about your experiences on Harvard's campus, especially, you were doing this, as you said, like you were just studying religions, and you were representing this one minority religion amongst many. And something that I don't think was very apparent to, most of us was how Harvard and a lot of these Ivy League schools, these quote unquote elite schools, really did treat Jews and freedom of speech and all of these different things that have come to light post October 7th. So I'm curious to hear more about your experience. Were there any days in particular where you had a specific? Dude, you gotta stop. Sorry, dude. I'm not in my studio today. Were there any days in particular where you had a specific experience that were just like, oh, eye-opening? Oh, well, like this is something that's a problem. This is a growing problem.
Sure. So first, I want to pick up on the language that you used, which I think is really critical to this discussion. The chairwoman of the House Education Committee, Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, does not call them elite universities. She calls them expensive universities. And I think that's pretty apropos. And I think it's a pretty relevant terminology. I think it's actually quite important because the American public, myself included, very much have this facade, or this illusion, I should say, that the Ivy Leagues represent our best academically, morally, religiously, politically, intellectually. And what I found to be really overwhelming is that it just wasn't true. So I'll give you an example. We were part of, I shouldn't say we, I was a part of Harvard Divinity School's student life, student culture. I very much wanted to be, as much as I could, a part of the school environment because, as you said, I knew that I was representing something bigger than myself. I was representing Orthodox Jewry. And I would take classes that were very contrary to my beliefs and to my experiences. So I took classes called Religion, Nationalism, and Settler Colonialism, the Case of Israel-Palestine. I joined, not that I was a part of it, but I wanted to observe. I joined the Jews for Liberation and their religious ceremonies that were all about ridding themselves of the sins of apartheid and settler colonialism and genocide. Not, again, because I believed it, but I wanted to let them know that, hey, I'm an ally. You know, even though we disagree, that doesn't mean we're therefore not friends. And there was one particular incident that really stood out for me. There's a course taught at Harvard, which is quite popular, called Narratives and Displacement, the Case of Israel-Palestine, where in addition to being a regular course during the semester, you spend roughly 3 or 4 weeks in Israel-Palestine on the ground. So as you can imagine, many, many people apply. It's quite difficult to get accepted into the program, but I applied. And I remember during the interview, I won't say the names, but one of the 2 professors who were overseeing the course said, "Oh, well, we never had someone like you apply before." And I didn't know if they meant because I lived in Israel, because I was a Zionist, because I'm Orthodox. And I said, yeah, you know, I really want to broaden my horizons, deepen my understanding of ideologies that I'm just unfamiliar with. And she said, well, we're very concerned. Okay. He said, once you come to Israel-Palestine, which is what it's called, it's not called Israel and West Bank, it's Israel-Palestine. Anyways, once you come to Israel-Palestine and you see the truth on the ground, you see the apartheid in action, you see the oppression, you see the settler colonialism narrative, you will be so disillusioned with the community that you grew up in, with your synagogue, with your school, with your family, once you realize that everything they have inculcated you with has been a lie. And they said, through this process of unlearning, which is something, a term so ridiculous only an academic could think of it, through this process of unlearning, we're concerned that you will experience deep, deep trauma and even resentment towards your community back home. And we don't want to be responsible for it. So needless to say, I was rejected from the course. But that to me was so revealing, that you can have professors who are so adamant, and I would even argue arrogant, that their way is so accurate, that is so objectively true, that is the reality, that they have to impose that on their students. And I don't know how to say this politely, so I'll say it not politely, the balls it takes to tell a student that we know what's true. And not only do we know what's true, we're so concerned that you will realize it's true too, that you won't be able to go back to your community. And to sound like a liberal elitist for a moment, the fact that these types of conversations and these types of professors exist at Harvard, which quite accurately purports to train the next generation of American leaders, presidents, senators, religious leaders, thought leaders, that's very scary. It's very, very scary. And it's dangerous for our country. And you don't have to be Jewish to recognize that.
I agree completely. My mind there, as you were telling that story, went to a leadership thing, as we are on Maker's Bar. It did go to a leadership perspective of, it sounds like a glaring lack of leadership. Now that we're in the present day, you can say, well, it's a Harvard problem. It's a lot of colleges problem. But right there in that moment with those 2 professors, it's a big lack of leadership, because if I'm a leader and I have this perspective, I tend to be more open-minded. I try and talk to as many people. I feel like I'm very similar to you, where I try and get as many perspectives as I possibly can. But if I have this perspective and I have this narrative that I really believe in, and someone like you came across, I would think, well, we have to bring this kid in. We have to show him, and this might be hard for him, but then this could spark more conversation when he goes back to his own community. Maybe that's how we cause change, step by step by step. And in my mind, that's leadership. That's what you do. And you have a concern. If I'm concerned for you, then I'm, hey, this could be hard for you. You can come to me at any point in the process, whatever. But yeah, that is very revealing. I think that's a very revealing story of how, oh my gosh, like, not only is there lack of leadership, there's lack of curiosity. It's just wild to hear, because now that we're all disillusioned from this great big, like you said, expensive school, elitist school, expensive school myth, maybe it's less wild. But going through that, I'm sure that was part where your disillusionment came in, from a freshman to where you are now.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so we can fast forward here to the night of October 7th. All of our lives changed. I would love to hear how that night was for you. You said everything changed for you on that night, and then kind of like the story from there, because from that moment, I mean, you've formed a public persona and identity, and you've found yourself in this leadership place and role.
Right. Well, that certainly wasn't the plan, and
Of course,
we can talk about that later. But that wasn't the goal here. You asked a really important question, and the way you phrased it is so spot on, because oftentimes people will say, "Okay, what was anti-Semitism like post October 7th?" But they ignore, no, it wasn't post. It was on the night. It was as it was happening, and that's really important. We can't let those students and professors off the hook for their behavior, their mentality, and their actions as babies were being beheaded, as women were being raped, as American citizens were being held hostage, taken hostage. So I was at the Harvard Chabad and the Harvard Hillel, which are the two Jewish organizations on campus. It was the holiday of Simchas Torah, which is a joyous Jewish holiday where we celebrate the completion of reading the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, and then we restart again that day. As we're celebrating and we're dancing and we take out the Torahs from the Ark in the synagogue, all these rumors began circulating. There was stabbing, no, it was a bombing, no, it was a shooting. And the unfortunate reality is, especially those in the Jewish community will appreciate, the reality of having a Jewish state in the 21st century is, yeah, there are terrorist attacks. It just happens. I remember my second year living in Israel, there was a stabbing about a block away from and that's just the reality of the Jewish state. So life goes on, so to say. The problem was, as the hours went on, the rumors only increased in its severity, and it became more substantive. We had a clearer, somewhat, picture of what was happening. And for the very first time in my life, I used my phone on Jewish holiday. As a religious Jew, you cannot use electronics, phones included. And I was 24 at the time. I had never done that before, but I did, to contact my loved ones. I have 3 siblings and 2 sibling-in-laws. I live in Israel, 2-year-old nephew, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Wanted to make sure that everyone was okay, and thank God they were. But as I'm doing that, and as dozens of Jewish students at Harvard are doing that, and as thousands of Jewish students across college campuses in the United States are doing that, we have 34 student groups at Harvard University representing more than 1,000 students jump out of their beds. Some were still in their pajamas to draft what they called an emergency statement to blame Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. In fact, the opening line of that statement is, "We hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all ongoing violence." This is the night of October 7th. There's this great line by MLK, "We won't remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." We in the Jewish community would be fortunate to simply have the silence of our friends, but we had the active cheering on behalf of our friends. And in fact, at the Harvard Divinity School student WhatsApp group, a student had posted that they were organizing a rally called on the night of October 7th, called "Long Live the Palestinian Resistance, Victory is Ours." And the reaction from my classmates was as if he was organizing a picnic. Can I make signs? Is it open to the community? People were liking it. It's shocking. That is something I will never be able to forgive, never be able to forget. Never. think of all the things that came after, the encampments, the physical assaults, the anti-Semitic cartoons, that to me, the night of October 7th will always be fundamental to my, to use your term, leadership position, to my narrative, to what animates my policies. It will be the night of October 7th. And in fact, when I was asked to speak at the Republican convention, I'm a registered Democrat. I've never voted for a Republican before in my life. I posted on my social media saying that I will be speaking at the Republican convention. If you would like to know what changed, please see the picture below of what my classmates were doing on October 7th. And it was a screenshot of this Long Live the Palestinian Resistance WhatsApp picture that I was just describing. So that just really put us in a position whereby we didn't have time to mourn or to grieve or to discern exactly what was occurring, but we were immediately put in a defensive position to defend not only the right and the obligation that the state of Israel had to defend itself, but to defend our right to be on campus, to defend our people, to defend all that we know to be true. And things really went from 0 to 100 in just a couple of hours. So,
sure. This is when everything changed at Harvard. I mean, all these campuses, but Harvard specifically. I'm sure you've heard of an organization called FIRE, where they rank free speech. So Harvard is ranked dead last in free speech.
248th out of 248 universities.
For years. I truly think for years. And all of a sudden, it's a champion of free speech. So as you're going through your days, because October 7th hits and it's all different, all changes. I remember myself on that day and on October 8th seeing friends. Like Twitter is one thing, and I'm very active on Twitter because I source a lot of guests that way, both within this political activist realm as well as business and everything like that. But it's Twitter. It's a battlefield. It's its own thing. What was very scary for me on October 8th was seeing the campuses, and we're going on Instagram and seeing like all the friends, like the things that you said, we would have been lucky to have the signs of our friends, all these people proudly posting the hang gliders. And it was even, I remember I had a lot of friends who went to the University of Wisconsin who they made their protest banner or whatever it's called with the hang glider and with middle fingers and down with Israel, all these things that that was the proud thing that people were reposting all this. I was just very much taken aback. So like you said, it was immediate defensive position, no time to mourn. How did your journey progress from October 8th into this moment where you find yourself speaking in the Republican National Convention?
The short answer is I don't know. I always say when I started speaking out, there was no plan. There was no end goal. There was no real objective. It was simply a matter of me doing what I do best, which is complain. I was simply pointing out exactly what was happening at Harvard. That was basically it. I wasn't really offering any magical insight. I wasn't sharing a unique perspective. I was just telling people that, holy shit, what is happening is so irrational, so unbelievable, so un-American. And I just began posting. I had barely used Twitter before October 7th. And in fact, I remember my roommate helped me draft my first post on Twitter because I wasn't sure how to do it. And I just felt that I had to tell people what was happening because it was almost affirming to me that other people are seeing this too, right? The fact that we had on October 11th, I think it was, or 12th, we had 1,000 students and professors rally in the center of Harvard Yard with Palestinian flags. This is before, of course, Israel invaded or had any type of significant response. And a student speaker gets up and says that Hamas is not a terrorist organization and they will be looked down in 10, 20 years as freedom fighters. And everyone gives them applauses and thunderous claps. It was almost as if you were living in the Twilight Zone. And again, to sound like that liberal elitist, this is happening at Harvard University. This is where the presidents and the Supreme Court justices and half of Congress comes from. What is going on? So I just began telling people. And unfortunately, there weren't a lot of people doing that. There weren't a lot of people sharing, telling, describing what was going on. And I'm not particularly brave or intelligent or articulate or wise. I just felt that I needed to share exactly what was occurring. And the first time I was contacted by national media was Fox News. I don't know, maybe it was 3-4 weeks after the fact. And the producer literally said, "We saw something you posted on Twitter. Would you be interested in commenting on it?" I said, "Sure." Again, not because I was so excited to go on Fox News, not because now I can be a national contributor to the media, but just because, great, someone is going to amplify exactly what's going on, and I'll be able to tell as big of an audience as possible. That was the goal. That was it.
Yeah.
And then one interview led to another, which led to other national media picking up on it. And then I guess I'm not the spokesman for the Harvard Jewish community. We're not a monolith, but I began to represent stories that were not mine. I began to represent pain that others were experiencing. And there's actually this really great story of a 20th century rabbi by the name of Moshe Feinstein. And he was really the leader of Orthodox Jewry in the United States, really undisputed. If anyone had a question on Jewish law or question on theology, you go to Moshe Feinstein. And he was once asked, actually, by the New York Times toward the end of his life. He was in his late 80s. And they said, "How did you get to be, the rabbi of American Jewry? How did that happen?" And his answer, it was really endearing. And I think is something, not that I'm comparing myself to Moshe Feinstein, but it's somewhat related to how I kind of became in this position. He said, "Well, one day I was sitting in the study halls, learning Jewish texts, learning the Talmud, and a student came up and asked me a question. I answered, and I guess he liked the answer because the next day 2 more students came up to me. And a couple of years go by, and lo and behold, I now have thousands of people coming up asking me questions every day." It's not that Moshe Feinstein had a plan. It's not that he wanted to be this decisor of Jewish law for American Jewry. He just answered a question, and then 2, and then 5, and then 10, and so on and so forth. I didn't have a plan. I just decided, okay, if they're going to have me on their show, then I'll talk about it. And if they want me on their show, and if they want me, then I'll just continue to talk. And honestly, that's how I really conceive of my role to this day. If people want me to speak about what's happening at Harvard, I will do it without question. If they want me to talk about the issues of higher education, if they want me to talk about the need to bring home the hostages, including the American hostages in Gaza, if they want me to talk about the necessity for a strong bilateral U.S.-Israel partnership, I will do it. And if the Democratic National Convention wants me to speak, or if they want any Jewish students to speak, or any family of the hostages to speak, we would do it in a heartbeat.
No, I love that. I love that story, the Moshe Dayan story. That's a great one. And reminds me of a quote where, great men great men don't choose to lead. They're called to lead and they answer the call. And it sounds
I'm not a great man, but Moshe Feinstein very much was. So yes.
You could argue doing great things right now. Maybe on a smaller scale or a different scale or whatever it is. But it's important work, and you were called to it. You were called to it for whatever reason that one can come up with. But it's a very cool story. It was very cool being able to see. I don't know when exactly I came across you on Twitter, but seeing that growth and seeing the whole journey play out from a distance and then sitting here today talking with you. It really is a great story. I'm wondering, as you said, you've become this voice of like untold stories on campus. Have there been any stories that have stuck with you from Harvard that you were talking to a student that they told you that you've been able to amplify to the world?
Yeah. So first of all, in our lawsuit, it's 6 students total. I am the only named plaintiff, so I sort of became the unwitting face and voice of it. But there are 5 other students. The condition for them coming on was they very much did not want to have their names out there. They don't want to be called to testify. They don't want to be known in any way, shape, or form. Now, we filed the lawsuit in mid to late January. For about 2-3 months, I was meeting and speaking with more than 100 Jewish students, undergrad, law students, medical students, just hearing their stories, and also encouraging them to be plaintiffs, but that was less successful, but more of just hearing their stories. And while there are a couple that stand out, what I think is way more powerful is creating these patterns. The Harvard Jewish Alumni Alliance, which was formed shortly after October 7th, released a very damning and heartbreaking report. The same week, actually, that the House Education Committee also released a report on the situation at Harvard. And the overwhelming consensus amongst students and Jewish faculty and Jewish families who lived on campus was that they felt that they were treated categorically different than every other minority group on campus. And again, I could get into specific examples, and I'm happy to do that, but that always stuck out to me. The fact that so many people, it wasn't one or two or even four or five, it was hundreds of students and faculty and professors and family members saying that, yeah, I don't feel that I am welcomed here. I don't feel that I have a space here. And if African American students were saying that, my heart goes out to them, and I would be a vocal champion on the need to reform that. If LGBTQ plus students were saying that, my heart would go out to them and do everything I can to alleviate that. But for whatever reason, when it comes to Jewish students saying this, and they've been saying it for years, there doesn't seem to be the same amount of concern, and there certainly doesn't seem to be the same amount of policy implementations to alleviate those concerns. So, as I said, I will never be able to forget the actions of my classmates on October 7th. I will never be able to forget the countless stories I've heard of young people, young Jewish students who were in such pain, saying that they didn't feel like they belonged here. I mean, what a damning indictment on the state of being Jewish at Harvard. What a damning indictment that in order to alleviate these concerns, we have to resort to a court of law and hope that a judge will force Harvard to do its own job. That's a shame.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it even seems like you don't have the same standard held. I'd say it's objectively true. When the president of Harvard can't answer, hey, is calling for genocide against Jews, does that violate your bullying policy? Well, it depends. Well, I think it's objectively true. I mean, at least to me, it seems like it's objectively true, I guess. But it is wild. It is absolutely insane. And I wanted to get to the lawsuit eventually. I think that's one of the big, very courageous steps that you've taken, as well as being the face for all these people. Like you said, you met with hundreds of people. You try to get them to testify. Not that successful. You're with 6 of the plaintiffs. They want to be anonymous. That makes sense. Like this is something that maybe you and I are comfortable doing, but it's very brave. And when you get to the scale that you're doing to that, where you're going to be attacked and you're going to be recognized on campus as this, and you're like, so there's going to be these things. It's very, very brave. Did that, and after this, we will get that lawsuit. But did that ever like pop in your head? Does that kind of like something you think about at all when you're in your day to day when you're up there at Harvard?
Yes and no. The no part is because, similar to my earlier answer, I didn't have a plan. I didn't think long term. I just felt each day, what can I do to make the situation different and better? That was it. And, it's funny. I told this, we have a WhatsApp group now of the Harvard Jewish community, or most of the Jewish community, not the Jews who are taking part in the encampments and calling for an intifada. They're not welcome. But I often joked with them. I said, every day for the last 6 months, I wake up and I think, how can Harvard possibly top the disaster that was yesterday? Like, what are they going to do today? And lo and behold, they find a way. They somehow are able to mess it up. Each and every day there was something else. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. Since October 7th, every day there was a something else. There was another incident. There was another problem. There was another fire to put out. So I wasn't thinking long term because I didn't have that luxury. Mm-hmm. Now, the yes part is after you go on Fox a couple of times, after you criticize your classmates enough, they start getting upset with you. And I've always been careful not to name names. And I will continue to do that. But I lost almost all of my non-Jewish friends, almost all. I sat alone at the lunch table more days than I care to count, which, to paraphrase Winston Churchill, if these are the enemies you're making, you're clearly doing the right thing. There was no more greater stamp of approval of what I was doing than after my speech at the Republican convention, the far right was sending me death threats and the far left was sending me death threats. So, clearly if I pissed off both of those contingencies, I must be, straight on target. But as I said, I really just did not have the luxury to strategize. And that's why I try to be as careful as possible by not making myself the spokesman, because one, I'm not. And number two, I haven't been perfect. There were things I said that I shouldn't have said. There are ideas I could have articulated better and more forcefully. But I'm just a student. I'm good at studying. I'm good at taking tests. I'm good at being in a library. This is a very new space for me. And I have varying degrees of success, but I made a lot of mistakes. And I would like to think I own up to them. So,
no, through what's a half hour of talking with you, I can tell that you do, that you're genuine and you are trying your best and you're human. You can admit when you make those mistakes. Like, man, I've said things. I guess I have a luxury of not being, as well known in certain segments and everything. So I've said things like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Or I should have put that better. I should have phrased that better. That's just comes with the territory of what you're doing. I know there's things that can, rattle in your brain, but I'd say try not to worry about it. As long as you're being a genuine person and you're fighting for what you think is right and all of those things, it should all come together. And on that note, it seems like everything right now is coming together heading towards this lawsuit. So I'd like to hear more about this, as this has really been propelling you into the news lately. Is this lawsuit that you're bringing against Harvard? Kind of what's the goal? What's the end goal here? How is this all going to play out as far as you know? And why this action? Of everything, why this one?
Yeah. So, man, where to begin? Number one, to sound repetitive for a moment, I can think of no greater indictment of Harvard and higher education. In order to receive equity, justice, and fairness, we have to sue them. Okay, I'll sound like a broken record. I'll keep making that point. I'll keep repeating it because these lawsuits are not just at Harvard. They're not just at the Ivy League, which they are. They're across college campuses.
Yeah.
I am part of a WhatsApp group of dozens of Jewish students from across this country who are engaged in legal efforts against their university. That's historic in the pantheons of American Jewish history, but it's also insane. Okay, it's insane. Now, in terms of our lawsuit in particular, one of the things the Trump administration did, this is not necessarily an endorsement, but this is just stating something that I thought was positive, is he reclassified Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits institutions that receive federal monies from discrimination. And so there are classifications of peoples you can't discriminate against. Religion is not on it. What is on it is national origin. And the Trump administration said, well, Judaism is not simply a religion. It's also a nationality. It's also an ethnicity. And this is true. Judaism is many, many things, but it's not just a religion. In fact, I think it's a plurality of American Jews don't even believe in God, but I digress. Mm-hmm. So if that's now the classification, then if Harvard or any institution that receives federal monies is discriminating against a religious group under this prohibition of national origin, you now have a claim. So we filed the lawsuit, and the crux of our lawsuit is Harvard is committing gross violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. They're violating federal law. What's our proof? Read the lawsuit. It's 200 pages of just one crazy incident after the other. That's sort of the bane of the lawsuit. We have a couple of other arguments, breach of contract. So when I pay Harvard tuition, even though I don't, I'm on a full scholarship, although don't tell Harvard's lawyers that, I expect, number one, a basic degree of protection and also educational opportunities. And when you have hundreds of masked thugs surrounding Widener Library yelling for an intifada, well, now you can't use that library anymore. So I've had diminished educational opportunities and I haven't had protection. When I had private armed security outside my house for a week because a staff member taunted me with a machete, that's on Harvard. That's on Harvard. Whoa. So our lawsuit really, really makes a powerful case that Harvard has been violating all of these promises, whether it's the school code of conduct, whether it's the contract I am part of as a student, or whether it's federal law. And I am very confident that the judge, who funnily enough is a Harvard Law graduate, that the judge will see our case for what it is. I can't comment too much on the specifics, but the facts speak for themselves. The evidence speaks for itself. And by the way, I'll just say something funny, a little behind the scenes trivia. The law firm that's representing Harvard, I believe it's called William Hale, I think. They're representing Harvard in our case. They are the same law firm that prepared then Harvard President Claudine Gay for her disastrous December 5th congressional testimony. So we feel pretty good about our chances.
Well, obviously, I'm rooting for you and all of these suits around campus because it's just insane. It really is insane how October 7th happened, and we're living in a different world. It's a completely different world where anti-Semitism has once again become openly accepted. It's something that I did see bubbling up, kind of off topic here, but something I did see bubbling up personally, like back in 2020. That's when I first really noticed it. Maybe it was even 2021. I'm trying to think back to the year, but it was this great time of social justice. Just one group of people after the next, and all of a sudden there's this kind of blip in anti-Semitism, and all the social justice people just got quiet, and it was very weird. Even some of them pushed back, like, "Hey, there's more important things happening. Don't talk about this." And it's like, whoa, like what is going? I've never seen a group be told don't talk about their own discrimination. And in hindsight, you could see how it was all building up to this moment, but impossible to predict that you would have found yourself in this situation. And you've handled yourself, from what I've seen, very gracefully. I'm excited to see where this lawsuit brings change, whatever happens, where it brings change, how it brings change. And then on that note, post this lawsuit, what are your plans? I mean, how has your life changed? Are you still going to say, "Hey, I'm here to study. I'm just going right back to what I was doing before"?
No.
How has your life changed? What are the plans going forward? Now that you've had a second to breathe, maybe you've had a second to breathe. I'm not assuming that.
It's funny. Before October 7th, I was really contemplating applying to a PhD program at Harvard, but that ship has sailed. I'm not spending one more day there. I've been very fortunate and blessed to be given a platform. It's a limited platform, but it's a platform where I can speak on behalf of the community that I know, that I was raised in, and that I love. And I will continue to be an advocate and an activist for change and for the betterment of the conditions for my community. What that looks like professionally, I just don't know yet. Not sure, but I do know. Whether it's in a professional setting or a hobby, I will never stop speaking out. I have the next 4 months of my life planned, at least. I'm going to conferences and conventions and speaking gigs and all that, and I will continue to speak as long as people want to hear me complain. But as I said, I'm very, very blessed. I think Charles Dickens said it best. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and it's certainly been the worst of times. It's been a really difficult year for me personally, and then for just way too many Jewish students across this country. At the same time, it has been so, I don't even have the right terminology, so positive, so moving, that I can reaffirm in a public setting my values. I can draw a sharp contrast between my beliefs and the beliefs of our ideological opponents. The Harvard Chabad, which I said earlier is the one of the main organizations of Jewish life on campus, has record numbers they just haven't seen for years. The amount of people I've met, young people who've said they've never really connected with their Jewish identity, but they now wear a yarmulke, or they now wear a Star of David, or they now go to a Shabbat meal on Friday night. That's pretty incredible. And I think that is a testament to the resilience and the passion at the heart of Jewish civilization, where I don't think this is my line. I think I heard this from somewhere, but we survived your gas chambers, we'll survive your gas lighting. I think that's pretty accurate. We've been through a hell of a lot worse, and every time we only come out stronger. 3 years after the Holocaust, we were able to create a state of our own. So I'm very interested to see what we'll be able to do 3 years after this episode. And I'm just incredibly fortunate to be part of this community.
No, absolutely. I think that gratefulness is super important too. It's something that all these silver linings I have found to be just incredible. Like, I wouldn't be here today sitting with you, speaking with you, getting to know you and your journey. And
likewise.
Yeah, and thank you. And a couple of days ago, I got to speak with a man who goes by the name Khalifa online. he's a Druze Israeli spokesman, basically. Maybe spokesman isn't the correct word, but podcaster. He tries to get the voice out and the word out of all these things. And he went straight from the funeral of 12 Druze children in the Golan Heights. He's part of this big community, and he came straight from that, showered, changed, and spoke with me. And just gave me that hour of his day, and just got to hear more about his story. I actually met him at a campus event. I live in Chicago. My cousin teaches on Champaign, Illinois University, and he organized a great event about anti-Semitism on campus, and Khalif ended up speaking there. So I met him there, got to know his story, and I planned this, months out, and just so happened that was that day. And it was one of those silver lining moments of, this horrible tragedy that just hit his community in particular. His community within the community, right? Like, just very much a huge tragedy for him and his family, and I got to speak with him right then, and it's just really moving conversation, and just a silver lining. And there's so many stories like that for me, and I hope for everyone that's involved. Truly, it really is. That's what you have to look for. Through these times, especially there's days where they're harder than others. You're more upset, more depressed, more angry, whatever it may be. Staying grateful. And turning to your values, that whether, for us, obviously, to be these Jewish guided values or American guided values, whatever it may be, but these things that can keep you grateful. So all to say, I'm very glad that you have that on your, that in your mind, and you really seem to be guided in the right direction by your heart and have a good head on your shoulders. I see why, again, just through 40 minutes here, I see why you've gotten as far as you've gotten, and I see nothing but great things ahead of you.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. And on that note, I'm curious now, kind of break away from your journey. I feel like we've done a decent job of covering that journey. What are some issues that kind of lie near and dear to your heart right now? And it can be very, very specific within Israel, Gaza, or American politics, anything at all that outside of just this campus fight that you have that you've kind of taken. I'm just curious now.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I'm going to say something super random that has nothing to do with anything. I live in New York City, and New York City has had a long, and I would say shameful history of horse-drawn carriages in Central Park. And these horses are abused, they are neglected, and they are not treated well at all. And this was years ago. I reached out to my local New York City council member saying, this is like so outrageous. How are we allowing this? And I've met with like a couple of different city council members. And just 2 weeks ago, I passed my New York City councilman. His name is Eric Dinowitz. And I said, like, dude, how are we still doing this? Again, this is super random. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism.
I love it, yeah.
Education. But because I have a platform, I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah.
It is really, really unconscionable that in the 21st century, in such a progressive city, we allow the open and public abuse of animals on our streets. I just don't understand how that has not been outlawed yet. And if any of you listening to this remember anything from this podcast, especially if you live in New York, I don't know what we can do, but I know that there's a bill being introduced or was introduced to the council called Ryder's Law, and we got to pass it. I mean, we should have passed it years ago, and it's so shameful. I walk past Central Park almost every day on my way to work, and it's heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking. I feel so powerless about it because no one really cares about these issues. Animal rights does not rank high on people's priorities, but that's something I'm really passionate about. Super, super random.
I love that. I'm curious now. That makes me very much more curious. Like this, what's the word here? I'm looking for here. Kind of righteous bone in your body. This, like, I want to fight the good fight. When did you realize you had this? You said this was years ago when you first kind of called a councilman about it. So this isn't really this new thing for you. You've always had this, need to stand up for. Yeah,
if you dig deep on my Instagram from years ago, you'll find a post I made. I remember I'm 25 now. I remember as a freshman in high school, I was 13 or 14. I went to protest at the Met because they were putting on a pretty anti-Semitic opera about Leon Klinghoffer, who was a Jewish disabled man killed by Palestinian terrorists on a cruise ship. Look up the story; it's pretty wild. They were putting on this opera, basically glorifying it, and so I went with other people under the leadership of a rabbi, and we protested. And I'm not saying that was the spark, because I don't think it was. I actually kind of only remember that story in the last couple of months. But yeah, I've been doing things like this for a while. Again, not because I'm particularly noteworthy or mentionable, but just because we have a saying in the Ethics of Our Fathers: "B'makom she'ein hanashim yishtadel lios ish." When there is a place where there are no men, strive to be a man. When you see a hole, when you see a void that needs to be fixed, just try your best. There's another quote actually: "Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor v'lo ata ben chorin," that it is not up to you to necessarily finish the work, but you are not absolved from trying to finish the work. So that's all I can really do, right? I can try my best, and that's it.
No, I love that. I love that. Did you have a? I know your next 4 months are booked. Did you have like a career aspiration for what you want to do now? Has that changed from your career aspirations? Like I'm talking like long term. I'm very curious now.
I think long term, I see myself going into elected office. I like the idea of maybe pursuing a career in Congress. It's because, as I said, I want to create change for my community, and you can do that on a legislative level, and that's what public policy in elected office is. So I don't have a concrete plan, but I see myself doing something in that field.
Very cool. Very cool. Would you want to go the Congress route? Just making it all up now. We want Congress route, Senate route. Do you have no idea?
Well, I think it's pretty hard to get elected to both of those things, especially the Senate.
Of course.
Whatever my community has patience for.
Yeah, that's very true. Before this, did you want to be a teacher, or did you?
I had worked.
Always in the back of mind.
I had worked in Jewish informal education, actually, professionally. I did that for about a year. So yeah, I like the idea of education, but I also have to afford a Orthodox Jewish lifestyle, and education doesn't pay well. So it was never going to be practical or long term. But I guess what I'm doing now is somewhat educational. I'm meeting young people across the country and educating them on how to stand up and fight back. So I guess that's somewhat educational. So.
That is educational. That is, by definition, pretty educational, and it is great, important work. No, I love that. Along your journey, have there been any mentors, maybe classes or books in particular that have helped you kind of find yourself, build up this leadership personality that you have?
I'm a little weird. Yeah, I'm a little weird. I have mentors, but they're all dead, and I never met them, and they died like 150 years ago.
Yeah.
So there are specific rabbis in Jewish history, like Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, who was known as the Kutzker Rebbe. He's a role model of mine, but as I said, he died 150 years ago in the middle of nowhere, Poland. So I don't know if that counts in terms of living mentors. Not really, but I'm definitely trying to find them. But I definitely am grounded with Jewish texts. That sort of keeps me cool. That I don't know if humbles me is the right terminology, but it humbles me. So, but I should definitely find a living mentor. I agree.
Well, you have time. You're only 25 years old. We're still in the adult world. You're basically 2, maybe 3 years old. You have a lot of time there, and honestly, a mentor is really just to help you along your way, help guide you. Try and pass some mistakes that they made, and as long as you have those texts to go back on, the people you can read their stories, you can learn from that. I still think it's great to have living mentors. Someone to call, someone to talk to, on your not best days, maybe on your best days too. But that's very cool. That is very, very cool. All right. No, I love it. I love everything that you're doing. I appreciate everything that you're doing. These next 4 months, what are some events that are coming up? Are you going to campuses? Are you going on more news networks? What are these next 4 months that you're fully booked?
That's a good question. Yeah, definitely campuses, definitely high schools. Definitely in the Jewish world, there are a couple of Super Bowl conferences. So the Israeli American Council, for example, or the American Jewish Committee, I'm going to their conferences. And speaking a lot of synagogues, of course, meeting a lot of nice Jewish grandmothers who want to send me up with their granddaughter. That's always a plus. But primarily in the Jewish world, I'm still going to DC pretty often, meeting with lawmakers, developing those relationships. But those I don't publicize as much. Those aren't really speaking opportunities. That's just, for me personally, to keep them informed on what's happening on college campuses. But yeah, there are a lot. If any of your listeners know of any of the Jewish conferences in the next 4 months, I will be there. So looking forward to meeting you all.
No, that sounds great. And where can everyone find you? Online and all those places?
Yeah. Well, I'm still figuring out how to use social media. So if any of you have tips, let me know. My Twitter is Shabbos K, and my Instagram, it's a little longer. It's Shabbos Kest. And I'm pretty active on both of those things. And I talk about, of course, what's happening at Harvard. I wade into politics every now and then. I've been told my takes are a little controversial, so you'll be the judge. And happy to connect.
Amazing. Once again, I appreciate what you're doing. It's very cool watching your journey. It's been very great getting to know you, and being able to watch this journey with just a bit more enthusiasm and a bit more skin in the game. And I'm excited to see where it all takes you. Excited to see you on your journey across America, and maybe one day in the future in Congress. Be very cool. So we'll see. But I thank you for sharing your journey with us. Thank you for being a leader. Truly appreciate it, and I'm excited to see again how your leadership grows and how you grow as a person.
I'll put it, first of all, thank you very much. And if I'm ever privileged enough to be elected to Congress, reach out to me. You'll be the first interview I grant, okay? Troy Golden.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Please, I first have to get elected first, but please do.
No, I will. I'm going to write that one down. Just so I'm going to write down and text you, hey, remember you said this. Just so you know.
All right.
Again, thank you so much. I appreciate you making the hour, truly. I know you're a busy guy and got a lot to do. So good luck with everything you're doing, and we will talk soon, I'm sure.
Take care.